The streets of Atlanta were cold that night, the kind of chill that seeped into bones and made every step heavy. Marcus Carter pulled his worn leather jacket tighter around his shoulders as he made his way home from the late shift at the auto repair shop. He was tired, his hands still stained with engine grease, but something ahead caught his eye. At the corner of Jefferson and Pine, under the dim light of a flickering street lamp, two small figures huddled together. At first, Marcus thought they were just neighborhood kids playing late, but as he drew closer, the truth unfolded. They weren't playing, they were shivering. Two little white children, one boy, maybe 8, and his sister, who couldn't have been older than 6, sat on a damp piece of cardboard, their clothes thin, their faces pale with hunger and cold. Marcus froze. He knew what the world might think. A black man approaching two vulnerable white kids on the street. Trouble could find him before he even said a word. But then he heard the girl cough, a weak, rattling sound, and his heart wouldn't let him walk away. "Hey there," Marcus said softly, crouching down so he wouldn't tower over them. "Y'all okay?" The boy's eyes narrowed, suspicious and scared. "We're fine," he muttered, though his trembling body told another story. Marcus looked around. No parent in sight, just the howling wind and the distant sound of sirens. He could have kept walking. It would have been easier, safer. But Marcus remembered his own childhood, how he grew up with nothing but the kindness of strangers keeping him alive. He couldn't turn his back now. Against every warning in his head, Marcus extended his hand. "Come on, let's get you warm." It was a decision that would change all their lives, forever. The boy hesitated, staring at Marcus's outstretched hand as if it were a trap. His small fingers clenched into fists, and his little sister leaned into him, whispering something Marcus couldn't quite hear. Their eyes, wide and fearful, said it all. They'd been hurt before. Marcus kept his voice calm, gentle. "Look, I don't want anything from you. Just a warm meal, maybe some dry clothes. That's it." The boy finally spoke, his voice trembling but defiant. "Why should we trust you?" It was a fair question. Marcus had no answer that would convince them in that moment. All he had was truth. He sighed and sat down on the wet curb, placing himself lower than them. "Because I know what it's like to be where you are. I know what it's like to have no one." His eyes softened. "I ain't here to hurt you. I just want to help." The girl tugged at her brother's sleeve. "Ethan," she whispered, "I'm cold." Her voice cracked something inside Marcus. Ethan, the boy, looked down at his sister, then back at Marcus. Distrust lingered in his eyes, but so did desperation. Slowly, cautiously, he reached for Marcus's hand. The warmth of that tiny grip startled Marcus more than he expected. "Good man," Marcus said softly, squeezing once before helping them up. They walked in silence toward Marcus's apartment, the sound of the girl's cough breaking the night air. On the way, Ethan finally spoke again. "What's your name?" "Marcus," he replied. The girl looked up at him with tired eyes. "I'm Lily," she said. Ethan added, still guarded, "And I'm Ethan. But we're not staying long." Marcus didn't argue. Deep down, he knew this was just the beginning of something far greater than any of them could imagine. Marcus's apartment was small, 2 cramped bedrooms, a living room with a sagging couch, and a kitchen that smelled faintly of motor oil from the clothes he hung out to dry. It wasn't much, but compared to the sidewalk where Ethan and Lily had been sleeping, it felt like heaven. As soon as they stepped inside, Lily's eyes lit up at the sight of a warm yellow lamp glowing in the corner. She pressed closer to her brother, as if afraid it would all vanish if she let go. Ethan, however, scanned the place like a watchdog, his suspicion never wavering. "You hungry?" Marcus asked, already heading toward the kitchen. He pulled out a box of instant macaroni and cheese, the quickest thing he could make. He filled a pot with water and set it on the stove, trying to act casual like this was all normal. Lily sat quietly on the couch, hugging her knees. Ethan stayed standing, arms crossed, his sharp little eyes locked on Marcus. "Why are you doing this?" he finally demanded. Marcus paused, hand on the pot handle. "Because someone did it for me once," he said honestly. "When I was your age, a neighbor gave me food when I had none. Saved my life." Ethan didn't respond, but Marcus noticed his arms loosen just a little. When the food was ready, Marcus set 2 steaming bowls on the coffee table. Lily didn't wait. She dug in quickly, her small hands clumsy with the spoon. Ethan hesitated again, then slowly joined her. Marcus sat back, watching them eat like they hadn't seen food in days. "You two got somewhere to go after this?" Marcus asked gently. The silence that followed was heavy. Lily's eyes dropped to her bowl. Ethan finally muttered, "No." Marcus nodded slowly. He didn't say it out loud, but in his heart he already knew. These kids weren't leaving tonight. And maybe, just maybe, not for a long time. That night, after the dishes were cleared and the apartment grew quiet, Marcus set up a makeshift bed for Ethan and Lily. He pulled out his old blankets and spread them across the couch, tucking them in like they were his own kin. Lily drifted off quickly, her tiny frame curling under the blanket, but Ethan stayed awake, his sharp eyes following every move Marcus made. "You don't have to watch me all night, you know," Marcus said with a faint smile as he sat down across the room. Ethan didn't smile back. "We've been lied to before. People say they'll help, but then they want something, always something." Marcus leaned back, letting out a heavy sigh. He understood more than Ethan realized. "Kid, the world's full of folks like that, but not everybody's out to use you." Ethan stayed quiet, his jaw set tight. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was Lily's soft breathing. Then Marcus spoke again, his voice softer this time. "You got parents somewhere?" The boy's eyes flickered, pain flashing across them. "Not anymore," he said bluntly. Marcus nodded slowly, not pressing for details. He knew loss had carved itself into those children deeper than words could tell. To ease the silence, he began sharing his own story. How his mother had worked 2 jobs, how sometimes they'd gone to bed hungry, and how neighbors who barely had anything themselves had kept him from sinking completely. "I swore," Marcus said quietly, "if I ever had the chance, I'd do the same for somebody else. Guess that's why y'all are here tonight." For the first time, Ethan's hardened gaze softened. He didn't say thank you, but his body eased into the couch as if, for just one night, he could rest. And Marcus, watching the boy's walls crack just a little, knew this was the start of a bond none of them could yet imagine. The next morning, Marcus was up before dawn, as usual. Years of working long shifts at the auto shop had wired his body to rise early. He brewed a pot of coffee, the bitter smell filling the apartment, then cracked some eggs into a pan. The sound of sizzling woke Lily first. She padded into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes, her hair sticking out in all directions. Marcus smiled. "Morning, sunshine. You like eggs?" She nodded shyly, sliding into a chair at the small wooden table. A moment later, Ethan appeared, still on guard, but clearly drawn by the smell of food. Marcus set plates in front of them and sat down with his own. They ate quietly, but Marcus noticed the way Ethan cut his food in half, pushing more onto Lily's plate when he thought no one was looking. It made Marcus's chest tighten. This boy was just a child, but he was carrying the weight of a grown man. "You don't have to do that, you know," Marcus said gently. "There's enough for both of you." Ethan froze, caught, then looked away. "Old habits," he muttered. After breakfast, Marcus gathered his things for work. He hesitated by the door, uncertain. Could he leave 2 homeless kids alone in his apartment? Would they be safe? But when Ethan noticed his pause, he straightened. "You going somewhere?" Ethan asked. "Work," Marcus explained. "Got to keep the lights on." Ethan's chin lifted. "We'll be fine." Marcus studied him for a moment. The boy's voice carried more confidence than his eyes did, but Marcus had no choice but to trust him. He scribbled his number on a piece of paper and left it on the counter. "If anything happens, call me from the payphone downstairs, all right?" When he stepped out, Marcus felt the weight of something new. Responsibility. Not just for himself anymore, but for 2 small lives that had stumbled into his own. And deep inside, he realized he didn't mind the weight at all. When Marcus came home that evening, the apartment was surprisingly neat. Lily sat cross-legged on the couch, coloring with a stubby crayon Marcus hadn't even realized he still had in a drawer. Ethan, however, was perched by the window, watching the street below like a sentry. "You kids eat?" Marcus asked, setting down his work bag. Lily nodded. Ethan made sandwiches. Marcus smiled faintly. Good man. But Ethan's eyes remained guarded, as if he were waiting for Marcus to reveal his true intentions. After dinner, Marcus sat across from them, finally breaking the silence. "I won't pry, but y'all got any other family? Someone who might be looking for you?" Ethan stiffened, his small fists tightening. We don't have anyone. Lily's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't speak. Instead, she buried her face in Ethan's shoulder. Marcus didn't push. He knew forcing answers would only make the walls higher. Instead, he leaned back and shared another piece of himself. I grew up without a dad, Marcus said. Mama did her best, but life wasn't easy. Some days I felt invisible, like nobody in the world cared if I made it or not. His voice dropped lower. That's a feeling I wouldn't wish on anyone, especially not you two. Lily peeked up at him, her small voice trembling. Our dad, he used to hit Ethan. He hit me too. Then one day he left, and Mom... Her words trailed off into silence. Ethan's jaw clenched, his arm tightening protectively around his sister. We don't talk about her. Marcus's heart ached, but he nodded. Fair enough. You don't owe me that story until you're ready. For the first time, Ethan's gaze softened. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was the closest thing Marcus had seen. And in that fragile silence, something unspoken formed between them, the beginning of family, built not by blood, but by choice. As days turned into weeks, Marcus's life began to change. Where once he returned home to silence, now he was greeted by Lily's laughter echoing through the small apartment, and Ethan's steady voice, reminding her not to spill juice on the couch. It wasn't perfect, but it was life, and for Marcus, it was more than he had dared hope for. But outside the walls of his apartment, the world had its eyes. The neighbors had started to notice. A black man living alone suddenly taking in 2 white children. It raised questions. One afternoon, as Marcus walked Ethan and Lily back from the corner store, Mrs. Hampton, his elderly neighbor, eyed him from her porch. She leaned on her cane and muttered loud enough for him to hear, "Ain't right. That man's got no business with them kids." Ethan stiffened, clutching Lily's hand tighter. Marcus heard the words, felt the sting, but he didn't react. Instead, he bent down to Lily's level. "Don't listen to that, baby girl. People talk when they don't understand." Later, though, Ethan cornered him in the kitchen. "She's right, isn't she? People think it's weird. Us being here." Marcus met his eyes firmly. "Let people think what they want. They don't feed you. They don't keep you warm at night. I do. That's what matters." Ethan frowned, but Marcus saw something flicker in his expression, relief. Still, the whispers grew louder. At the grocery store, Marcus felt eyes following him as he pushed the cart with Lily riding inside and Ethan walking beside him. Some looks were curious, some disapproving, others downright hostile. It would have been easier to quit, to send them off to the system and wash his hands clean. But each night, as Lily curled up on the couch with her coloring and Ethan stood watch by the window, Marcus knew one thing for sure. He wasn't letting them go. Not now, not ever. By the 3rd month, life had settled into a rhythm. Marcus worked long hours, came home tired, and yet the exhaustion didn't feel the same anymore. Now, when he opened the door, Lily ran to greet him with a giggle, and Ethan, though still guarded, always made sure Marcus's plate was ready on the table. It was a quiet kind of happiness, the kind Marcus had never known. But one evening, as Marcus helped Lily with her homework, Ethan broke the silence with a question that caught him off guard. "Why are you still keeping us here?" Ethan asked. Marcus looked up from the math problem, blinking. "What do you mean? You've been feeding us, buying us clothes, keeping us here. But you don't have to, so why?" Marcus leaned back, thinking carefully. He saw the boy's eyes, hard and sharp on the outside, but trembling underneath. Ethan had been waiting for the other shoe to drop, waiting for Marcus to abandon them like everyone else. "Because family don't walk away," Marcus finally said. "Blood or not, once you're mine, you're mine." Lily beamed, her little hand grabbing Marcus's arm. "You're like our daddy," she said innocently. The room fell silent. Ethan stiffened at the word, but Marcus didn't flinch. Instead, he reached across the table, resting his hand over Ethan's. "I ain't replacing nobody, but I'll be here as long as you'll have me." For the first time, Ethan's eyes watered. He blinked hard, trying to hide it, but Marcus pretended not to notice. Later that night, as the kids slept, Marcus sat in the dark living room, staring at the flickering streetlights outside. A father without a title, that's what he had become. And though the world might never understand, Marcus knew in his heart he was exactly where he was meant to be. It was a Saturday afternoon when the knock came at the door, sharp, demanding, the kind that carried authority. Marcus froze, drying his hands on a rag. Ethan and Lily, who had been playing a board game on the floor, instantly went quiet. When Marcus opened the door, 2 officers stood there. Their eyes flickered past him and landed on the children inside. "Marcus Carter?" one of them asked. "Yeah," Marcus replied cautiously. "We've had reports," the officer continued, "that you've been harboring 2 minors who aren't related to you. We need to ask a few questions." Marcus's stomach tightened. He'd known this day might come. The whispers, the stares, the way people looked at him when he walked down the street with Ethan and Lily. Still, he forced his voice to stay calm. "They're safe here. They had nowhere else to go." The taller officer glanced at his partner, then stepped forward. "Mr. Carter, we're going to need you to explain their situation. Where are their parents?" Before Marcus could answer, Ethan darted forward, his small frame tense with defiance. "We don't have parents. He's the only one who cares about us." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Lily clung to Marcus's leg, her face buried against him. The officers exchanged uneasy looks. One finally softened his tone. "Look, son, we're not here to hurt you, but things don't look right on paper. A black man, 2 white children, no legal guardianship, people get suspicious." Marcus felt the sting of those words, but he kept his jaw tight. Suspicious doesn't mean wrong. They needed help, and I gave it. The officers didn't arrest him that day, but they left with a warning. Social services would be contacting him soon. When the door closed, Ethan's voice broke through the silence. "They're going to take us away, aren't they?" Marcus knelt down, steady and firm. "Not if I can help it." And from that moment, a storm began to build, one that would test just how far Marcus was willing to go for the children he now called his own. The letter came 2 weeks later, an official notice from the Department of Child and Family Services. Marcus sat at the kitchen table, the paper trembling in his hands, as Ethan and Lily watched from across the room. "They're saying they'll send a worker to evaluate the situation," Marcus explained carefully, not wanting to scare them but refusing to lie. "They want to see if this home is appropriate." Ethan's jaw clenched. "They don't care about us. They'll just dump us somewhere worse." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "I don't want to go, Marcus. Please don't let them take us." Marcus reached across the table, pulling her hand into his calloused one. "You're not going anywhere without a fight." The next few days were a blur. Marcus scrambled to make the apartment look better than it ever had. New curtains, freshly scrubbed floors, even a couple of second-hand toys tucked into a basket in the corner. He wasn't rich, but he wanted the caseworker to see what he saw. A home. When the knock finally came, Marcus opened the door to a stern woman in a grey blazer, clipboard in hand. Her name was Miss Fletcher, and her eyes immediately scanned the room. Ethan stood close to Lily, protective as always. Marcus offered her coffee, trying to stay calm, but Miss Fletcher asked question after question. "Where do the children sleep? How do you provide for them financially? Do you have legal guardianship?" Each question felt like a stone thrown against the fragile life Marcus had built. Finally, Miss Fletcher closed her folder. "Mr. Carter, I can see you care for these children, but care alone doesn't make it legal. Without paperwork, you're in violation of state law." Marcus felt his chest tighten. "So what happens now?" Her answer was as cold as it was final. "We'll need to schedule a time to remove the children into state custody." The words hit like a hammer. Ethan's face hardened in silent rage, and Lily buried her face against Marcus's arm, sobbing. But deep inside, Marcus made a silent vow he would not lose them, not without a fight that shook the very foundations of the system stacked against him. The apartment was silent after Miss Fletcher left, her words still echoing like a curse. Marcus sat at the table, his head in his hands, while Ethan paced the room like a caged animal. Lily clung to Marcus's arm, her tear-streaked face pressed against him. "They can't do this," Ethan muttered, his fists balled at his sides. "We're not going back. I won't let them take Lily." Marcus lifted his head, his tired eyes locking onto Ethan's. "You won't have to. I promised you both you're safe here, and I intend to keep that promise." "But how?" Ethan shot back. "They got the law. They can do whatever they want." Marcus leaned forward, his voice steady but filled with fire. "Then I'll fight the law. I'll go to court. I'll get a lawyer. I'll do whatever it takes. You hear me? I ain't letting them tear this family apart." The word family hung in the air, and for the first time, Ethan didn't flinch at it. He stared at Marcus, his tough mask cracking just a little. "You really mean that?" Marcus nodded firmly. "With everything I got." That night, after the kids had finally drifted off to sleep, Marcus sat alone in the living room staring at the stack of bills on the counter. A lawyer would cost money he didn't have. Time was running out, but then he glanced toward the couch, where Lily was curled up with her blanket, and at the window where Ethan had finally stopped his restless pacing and fallen asleep. Marcus whispered into the quiet, "I'll find a way. I have to." It was a vow carved into his soul. No matter what the system tried, no matter what the world thought of him, a black man raising 2 white children, he would stand and fight. Because for the first time in his life, Marcus wasn't just living for himself, he was living for them. The courthouse smelled of old wood and polished floors, but to Marcus it smelled like fear. He sat stiffly in a worn suit, his hands folded tightly in his lap. Beside him, a public defender shuffled papers, whispering legal jargon that only half made sense. Across the aisle, Miss Fletcher sat straight-backed, her clipboard perched neatly on her knees, representing the system that wanted to rip Ethan and Lily from his life. When the children entered, escorted by a caseworker, Marcus's heart clenched. Lily rushed toward him instinctively before being pulled back, her little eyes brimming with tears. Ethan, though, stood tall, his face like stone, but his eyes darted to Marcus, searching for reassurance. Marcus gave him a small nod, the kind that said, "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." The judge entered, his gavel striking down. "This court will hear the matter of guardianship regarding minors Ethan and Lily Hayes." The arguments began. Miss Fletcher spoke first, her tone sharp but professional. "Your Honor, while we do not doubt Mr. Carter's intentions, the fact remains that he has no legal claim to these children. They have been in his custody without authorization, which violates state law." Marcus's lawyer rose. "Your Honor, what my client has done is nothing short of heroic. He found 2 abandoned children, cared for them, fed them, clothed them, and kept them safe when no one else did. To tear them away now would not only be cruel, it would be destructive to their well-being." The judge listened, impassive, but then Ethan did something no one expected. He stood up. "Your Honor," the boy said, his small voice echoing in the vast room, "he's our dad. Maybe not by blood, maybe not by paper, but he's the only one who's ever been there for us. If you take us away from him, you'll be taking away the only family we have left." The courtroom fell silent. Even the judge leaned forward, studying Ethan's defiant stance. For the first time, Marcus saw the future shifting, uncertain but no longer hopeless. The courtroom was so quiet Marcus could hear his own heartbeat. Ethan stood tall before the judge, his little fists clenched but his voice unwavering. "Please don't take us from him. He's all we've got." The judge adjusted his glasses, eyes moving from Ethan to Lily, who now gripped Marcus's sleeve with all her strength, and then to Marcus himself. Finally he spoke. "Mr. Carter, you've taken on responsibility that many would have walked away from. The law is clear, but so is the evidence of love and commitment in this room. I'm granting you temporary guardianship of Ethan and Lily Hayes, effective immediately, pending adoption proceedings." Lily gasped, hugging Marcus's arm tight. Ethan's mask cracked, and for the first time in months he smiled, a real smile, small but shining with relief. Marcus felt his chest tighten, his eyes stinging. He managed to whisper, "Thank you, Your Honor." It wasn't adoption yet, but it was hope. It was a doorway to the future. Years rolled forward from that day like pages turning in a book. Marcus raised Ethan and Lily as his own, through school projects, scraped knees, teenage defiance, and late-night talks at the kitchen table. He worked harder than ever, but the weariness never outweighed the joy. They became a family, not because of law or blood, but because of choice and sacrifice. 20 years later, that sacrifice would be repaid. Marcus, now an older man with graying hair, found himself in the fight of his life, wrongfully accused, facing a life sentence for a crime he didn't commit. The system that once tried to take his children was now trying to take his freedom. But this time, it wasn't Marcus standing alone in the courtroom. It was Ethan and Lily, grown, determined, and armed with truth. And when they spoke, their voices carried the same fire Marcus had once given them. "He saved us. Now we'll save him." The circle was complete.